months of waiting, we now know the Murray Darling Basin Authority plans to reduce annual water use from the basin by 2,750 gigalitres. That's the important figure.
And the chair of the Murray Darling Basin Authority, Craig Knowles, joins us now from Canberra. Craig Knowles, good morning. Can you firstly point out for us the key differences in this draft plan compared to that controversial guide to the draft plan that was released last year?
Well, Francis, it's a million miles away from the guide that was released a year or so ago. In fact, what we've done is build in a process that allows people to get into the adaptive management of the basin over 7 years through to 2019. The numbers are lower, and of course we build in checkpoints and safety nets along the way to monitor how we're going. Where the guide was, if you like, a big cut of water all on one day, the draft plan that's now out for 20 weeks public consultation is a process that starts a journey that lets people engage and join in and allows the numbers indeed to adapt over time as new information comes online, whether it be through new infrastructure or new science or better management of the rules of the system, recognising that for the last couple of hundred years we've had a layer cake of rural state-based administrations that represents, if you like, the old way of managing the basin. The real challenge here is to move to a new way of managing the basin in its entirety for all of its values.
And because of those checkpoints that you mentioned and the length of time available to implement the draft plan, some people have already criticised it as being too vague. Do you agree that it is a document of political compromise?
Well, Francis, I think we're going to have to be just inured to the fact that there are going to be people at either end of the spectrum criticising the plan. There'll be people who are saying I'm not doing enough, or people who are saying I'm doing way too much. In the end, we have to strike a balance that respects the fact that the basin provides a lot of food and fibre. It's the home to literally hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people, and we need a healthy working environment, a healthy working basin that underpins that for the future. So what we've done is start a journey here, recommending a proper management regime for the Murray-Darling Basin. You can't manage a river system as big as the Murray-Darling as a snapshot in time. You do have to have processes that take you through time, learning by doing, making sure that you bring into play new knowledge as it comes to hand.
Because of the wriggle room that you've allowed yourselves and no real specific reduction targets, you talk a lot about shared reduction, do you not risk then creating uncertainty for the irrigators involved and then making things even worse for them?
Well, I think the bigger uncertainty is not moving into a new way of managing the basin. I think history demonstrates the reason why this plan needs to exist is because the old way of managing the basin has well and truly reached its use-by date. John Howard acknowledged that in 2007 when he sort of kicked all of this off, and the Water Act that Malcolm Turnbull introduced a couple of years later reinforced that point. We have to move away from the, if you like, the warring factions, be they different views in different states or the different views of conservation groups versus irrigation groups and farmers. What we have to do is work together, take a step forward into the future and start a journey. So my process, the process that's in the plan, is about starting somewhere and moving forward. I recognise that people have different views, and that's not a bad thing. But the only way to reconcile those differing views is to allow a process where they can be tested. The assertions of one group over another or one state over another need to be properly tested in a collaborative environment rather than as competing interests, as has been the case for generations.
You do a lot of modelling throughout, a lot of modelling was done for the draft plan, but there isn't any specific reference to expected economic and social impacts in specific communities. Can you give us an idea? I mean, farmers are still talking about the possibility of thousands of job losses. Can you tell us if that is something that the authority does expect?
Yeah, two quick points before I come to the nub of your question. First of all, a lot of the detail will be up on the internet during the course of today, which will further explain a lot of that in detail. Secondly, I would be very cautious about some of the extravagant claims that will inevitably be made on both sides of this debate. The truth is, economic and social impacts can be managed depending on what the remaining volume of water is to be obtained is obtained. So we think there's about 1,468 gigalitres left to be obtained through to 2019. If that's done through, for example, infrastructure, and we stress in our paperwork, our plan, a need for a bias towards infrastructure, that can have positive effects. Equally, if it's not done in that mix, there can be different effects. Also importantly, there are many parts of the catchment, many river basins, who have already done their bit, and therefore there will be effectively zero economic effect because they've already achieved the targets. But there are some places where more needs to be done, and the focus of the attention of the governments, not just the Commonwealth Government, but the governments of Australia throughout the basin, need to be on their needs, focusing with a bias toward infrastructure on making sure that as change occurs, it can be done sensibly and properly, and checking along the way through to 2019. I stress that there's a formal review point at 2015 where all of these impacts, not just environmental but social and economic, can also be tested as well.
But there will be job losses though, won't there, particularly in those irrigation-dependent towns?
Well, certainly irrigation-dependent towns, towns that have single cultures, if you like, based on one type of product, an irrigation product, are likely to be more vulnerable. But my point again is, depending on how the governments acquire the water will depend entirely on employment and social and economic impacts. For example, in northern Victoria, the Commonwealth Government has just injected $1 billion into totally retooling and refitting the northern irrigation sector. Now that's going to have positive economic effects and a dividend for the environment. I don't believe this needs to be a competing agenda. What I do believe it has to be is a journey that we all take together, valuing every drop of water, whether it be used for environmental purposes or economic purposes.
Craig Knowles, thank you. We don't expect it's going to be a document that everybody is happy with, but we'll hear the feedback from all the stakeholders throughout the day. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Francis.